Welcome to the first episode of this new series where I sit down with local Republican voices who are doing the work on the ground here in California. The goal with these conversations is simple: to build community, to platform real leaders, and to lay the groundwork for turning the state red. Now, I'm not claiming to have all the answers, but I do believe one of the most important things we can do right now is talk to each other, share ideas, debate, highlight the people who are actually out there fighting for conservative values in one of the most difficult political environments in the country. Because if we're going to change the narrative in places like West Hollywood, Los Angeles, and California at large, it starts here with conversations like this. And there's truly no better time than now. Today's guest is Tony Rodriguez. I met Tony at an event he hosted through the Glendale, Burbank, Crescenta Valley Republican Assembly. And since that night, he's been one of the most supportive and welcoming people I've met in the conservative movement. He's helped me connect with other activists, navigate this massive and sometimes chaotic landscape, and stay grounded in what truly matters: building momentum from the ground up. Now, Tony is a 25-year U.S. Army veteran who served this country with honor. He's also a two-time Republican candidate, most recently running for the California State Assembly in District 44. He's not a career politician. He's a father, a grandfather, and a man of faith who has chosen to take on one of the hardest political battles in the country, helping turn around a state that has been gutted by decades of Democrat corruption, one-party control, gerrymandering, and power consolidation. And despite all of that, he keeps showing up. This is a conversation with someone who's walked the walk, who knows what sacrifice looks like, and who believes in our values, and who refuses to give up on California. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming through. I want to start out with your service, because you served in the military. What initially, brought you to serve in the military?
Well, I was a young 18-year-old kid who was going to Laverne College for a semester, and after that one semester, I realized I don't know what I want out of life. I don't know what I want to do. I know I need to do something, but I just can't. I'm not ready for school. So I walked in the recruiting station with my birth certificate and my social security card and joined the Army.
And how does that work? As somebody who's never served, did they ship you away immediately?
Oh, no. You had to take a test and then a physical examination.
Yeah.
I got a medical examination, and then I got a deployment date of, I think it was 60 days after I walked into the office. I went to basic training in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. First time away from the entire family.
Yeah.
Which was, a little crazy and kind of scary at the same time. I was 19 years old then, and I was like, oh my God, did I make a mistake?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, basic training's harsh, huh?
It was rough. Back in the 80s, it was, because it was not very politically correct, and they could do things to us that, you can't do now to anybody. So it was but it helped me grow up. It just helped me become a self-serving, not self-serving, but a self-made man, where I had to grow up and I didn't have mom and dad to wipe me after something. It was all me, right?
Yeah.
It's all me. So I joined the Army, and great time. After I came back home from boot camp, I married my high school sweetheart.
That's great.
Which is, and we're still married.
That's great. How many years?
40. It'll be 45 in July.
That's great.
45 in July, yes. And when they shipped me out to Germany, I took her with me. So we were two 19-year-old kids in a foreign country, which is really, I think, was the foundation for us to be able to survive 45 years, right, of being married.
And how does that work? Because you said was there a war going on at the time, or
there was conflicts.
Yeah.
There was the Cold War, which was a big deal in Germany.
It was towards the end. Yeah.
It was a big deal in Germany. We spent a lot of time at the Czechoslovakian border, looking at the enemy. They would shoot at us. We couldn't shoot back.
Really?
Yeah, we couldn't
Why
shoot
is
back.
that?
Because they just did it to aggravate us, and they didn't want some kind of international incident because of young people firing back at other people. So
they knew you guys couldn't fire back, and they were just doing that. Wow.
And we did a lot of patrols. In those days, you could drive tanks and vehicles on the streets in Germany, which is kind of weird if you think about it.
Yeah.
We would park behind, restaurants, bars, homes.
That's weird.
It was really weird with big old tanks. I was in a tank unit my first assignment, so it was interesting. But what it did for me was, it helped my wife and I learn to survive without needing anybody else or leaning anybody else. There was no cell phones.
Yeah.
You couldn't call mom and dad.
Yeah.
Oh, my husband's mad at me. I don't know what to do.
You had to write a letter.
Yeah.
It'd take a month to get there.
go to a public phone station that they had in Germany and wait in line and pay to call home. So it was a different time.
So that was the tail end of the Cold War. How was it, just out of curiosity, how was the sentiment towards Americans at the time in West Germany, right?
Yeah, it was great. They loved us. I mean, they really loved Americans, and it made it a lot easier for us to learn their language because, we were liked, so we would go into town.
Yeah.
It was a different time. I think people were more kind to each other then, not just in Germany, but overall. And then as time went on, people let politics get in the way of who they truly are.
Yeah.
And that's really where the shame happened. Probably around early 90s in Germany, as the Americans were being pulled out of Europe. It got a little weird.
They also did like a huge swerve to the far left. It's almost like they, I don't know how familiar you are with their politics now, but they just had some more right-leaning representatives get voted in, but they were like far left for the longest time, like most of Europe.
And it's a shame. I know I still don't understand why countries like Germany go far left.
Yeah.
Everything they've been through, you would think that they wouldn't want to be that, right? They don't want to open the door or a window for something like that to happen again.
Yeah.
And then we follow suit, right? In our country, right? We started opening the window a little bit, cracking it. And then,
kind of playing around with it. And then, before you know it, it's...
No, and I get the fact that, everybody has rights. I totally understand that, right? But you also have to have some kind of rules and laws to manage that because things can become chaotic, which is some of the things we see now. When BLM got their turn, I think it was 2020, I understand their movement, but the way they did it was completely wrong. Right?
Yeah.
Attacking people and breaking up families. And I'm a prime example of that. I mean, I'm Puerto Rican, so my family's all over the place, mixed.
Yeah.
And you have some that lean far left and very few of us that are in the middle or lean to the right. And it became an issue where, we don't like you anymore.
I want to go back to the Army stuff in a second, but I do want to, because you touched on something, that I'm from Brazil, so we're both like fellow Latinos. And I think that that's something that politics-wise, I think there's an understanding, or people expect Latinos to vote Democrat or to be left-leaning. And there are a lot, like in my own family, there are a lot of people who are more left-leaning. Like my brother is very, very left-leaning. And funny enough, he lives in Germany too. So he's like, one of my cousins, he works for the Department of Defense in Brazil. And my brother stopped talking to him because he's in the military and he's very right-wing. And it's interesting to me how that dynamic plays out. And I think that, and this is something that I've seen get discussed a lot in the Republican circles about how there are actually a lot of Latinos that are right-leaning and have those values, but because of some misunderstanding, cultural misunderstanding, or sometimes just propaganda, they tend to move away from the right. I mean, how did you find yourself going to the right? Were you ever with left values, or did you ever identify with that or feel like you had to because of the culture?
I felt like I had to, but again, like when I left college, my family wanted me to go to college, right? You can't join the Army. The Army's for losers, right? Yeah. It's a place where rejected people go to. I joined the Army, right? Part of it was rebellion. Part of it was I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Same thing with the party. My parents, everybody was left. Yeah. When I registered as a Republican because I'm like, no, they haven't done anything for me, so why would I vote for them? Exactly. Right? So I became a Republican, and I was a Republican up until 2005. Then I left the party. I wasn't a big fan of President Bush.
And why? Do you want to explain why you left?
Because he lied to the American people, right? He put soldiers in harm's way on rumors and innuendos and not investigating. And I'm not a big fan of that, right? Being in the military, I know what our mission is, but if we go to war, then we better have all the right information, not lies and misleading. And I don't really think he was running the country then anyway. I think it was Cheney running. Cheney was
the military-industrial complex.
Yep. So I think it was all a sham, and I left the party. The first time I ran as an independent, which wasn't a smart idea, but I refused to join the Republican Party because they don't do a good enough job working together. They really don't. But then I saw a turn in the last couple of years. There's actually people, grassroots people, that really want to make a difference. And I want to be part of that. I definitely need to be part of that ground movement so we can fix the Republican Party, so that we can get people elected with common sense and people that really, truly care about the people, not their egos or the positions that they're going into.
And was it an immediate transition into political life, or did you
I took a big break.
Big break?
Big break. I did a lot of volunteer work in my community, and I did that kind of stuff, but I didn't get involved in politics until, I think 5 years ago, I decided to get in the political realm.
And what was the thing that sparked it?
My dislike for Adam Schiff.
Yeah, I think a lot of Californians, I share that. I hate that guy.
He was my congressman.
Yeah.
He's a liar.
Yeah.
He manipulates people. He doesn't even live in California.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
He lives in Maryland. That's his residence.
Yeah.
So I don't like people that are in leadership positions that take advantage of that position.
Yeah.
And that's the sad part, that a lot of people in politics, they might have good sentiments when they begin, but then they get caught up in that wheel.
In the game. Yeah.
And money becomes more important than the actual mission is.
The thing with Schiff was he was really obsessed during Trump's first term with like, getting him. He kept parading around the Steele memo the whole time. Wasn't that the whole thing? It's been a few years, so my memory's a little foggy.
That was exactly it. And he still hasn't apologized.
Yeah. And didn't he also just got pardoned.
Yes.
This is something, too, that just reeks of corruption, how they protect themselves so that they can keep the same behavior going. Right. That's more prevalent on the Democrat side right now because they've been able to get away with it so much for so long. It's almost like they got a blank check because they convinced the country and the world that they're the party of empathy. I think that's ultimately what got us to this point. The Democrats very successfully branding themselves as this party of empathy. And then Obama being in office and reacting, like I think also something like he did that actively just stoked the flames was, I forget which case it was. It may have been Trayvon Martin, where he said, that's my son. That could have been my son. It was, there's no reason why he had to interject like that. I understand relating to the situation, but to use the bully pulpit of the presidency to essentially disseminate that message, it just, you're stoking up racial tensions. And I don't think it's any coincidence that like just a few years later, you have BLM, you have all these essentially race riots. That's what they were all over the country. What happened in LA in '94, that was happening all over the country. And no Democrats want to do anything about it. You had Tampon Tim Walz out in Minnesota.
No, you're right. But they've done that with every group, if you think about it, right? That's LGBTQ, right? Yeah. Whatever other acronyms they want to use. But they talk about how people that were LGBTQ were always held down, held back. And I always give an example. I had 2 commanders in the military, both women, who were LGBTQ. We knew. We didn't care.
Yeah.
She did her job.
Exactly.
None of us cared, right? And I don't think most people care about that, but they made it an issue. They're mistreating your people, your group, right? They're abusing you. They're not giving you your rights. That's not true. They've always had rights to do whatever they want. Yeah. Right. And one was a colonel. So it wasn't like she was just a cat. She was a colonel.
She was high up.
Yeah. She was up in there, and she was married to another colonel in the Air Force, a woman colonel. Nobody cared. We just cared about how she led. Exactly. That's all that mattered.
And that's ultimately, I think, the value shift that happened in the last decade and a half, because things used to be about merit, right? And then all of a sudden it became about celebrating our identity, or you're oppressed because you're like this. And it's just such a self-defeating ideology over time. That's why we're seeing everything kind of collapse within itself. And I think ultimately, I mean, I don't want to sound like a conspiracist, but I think a lot of the times that's the ultimate goal. I think there's some, cultural Marxist goal of subverting American society so that we can crumble from within, and then whoever comes up after that installs themselves into power and consolidates it. And ultimately, I think it's the Democrats who want to do it. That's why they're importing so many voters and doing everything they've been doing.
Well, think about this. Most places like Russia, Ukraine, that part of the world, almost everybody lives in what? Apartments, right?
Yeah.
Government-controlled apartments, right? Nobody has cars, right? You're depending on the government for everything, transportation, place to live, right? Kind of what we're doing here in the United States, right?
Yeah.
Specifically in California, right? There's a construction site in Burbank off Empire, right? They built, I think, was 297 units and only 7 parking spots, right? 7, right? So you either are going to have to take your car, pay somewhere else to keep it at night, or not have a car and depend on public transportation. Now, our public transportation in California, or at least in LA, sucks.
It's awful.
Right?
Yeah. And it's also very dangerous.
Yes.
I've experienced the New York one. You've also, you're from New York.
Right.
I think LA is more dangerous than New York with the public transportation. I've been in the subway one time, and the one time I was in there, I saw a dude shooting up. Like nobody cared.
Right.
And in New York, you don't see that. You do see homeless people just living in the train cars, but you don't see somebody just actively, like, without a care in the world. Essentially, shoot, like, there could be kids, there could be anything, it's what you said. They ultimately want to strip us of our agency. They want to strip us of any. They essentially want to strip us of what the Constitution guarantees us, which are God-given rights, and make us fully dependent on the state, which they've gotten California up until that. I feel like we're 45, 50% of the way there in California. Right. And I think a lot of times California is the trial ground. It's where they try out all these things so they can do it in the rest of the country, because they've been importing voters here for decades. Years, yeah. And now it's all of a sudden it's popping up in Ohio. You got a whole city overrun by immigrants, 40,000 in a year, right? You got the same thing in Aurora in Colorado, right? And it's a very strange way to change the electorate, right? That with people who are coming in and immediately depending on Social Security, on using Medicaid or relying on our free healthcare here in California. I saw so many videos of people who live, I don't remember specifically what state this was, but this person said that the moment that Trump got into office, within a week, the health service wait time dropped from hours to minutes. They would go to this clinic specifically, and there would only be people speaking Spanish or other languages, and all of a sudden there was nobody there, and she could get help within 20 minutes. And I saw some statistic that in California too, the wait times were absurd because so many people were coming here, sometimes for healthcare specifically.
Well, it's funny because if you live in San Diego, a lot of people in San Diego cross the border, U.S. citizens go to see Mexican doctors.
Tijuana, yeah.
Right, because it's a lot easier to get prescriptions and all that. But I agree with you that California is a state that everything runs through. COVID, we're a great example for COVID, right?
Yeah.
We got shut down, couldn't go to work, couldn't do anything. The economy took a dump, but they had control, right? You couldn't even go see a family member passing away in the hospital without the COVID vaccination, right? Take a state like South Dakota, she left that state wide open. They didn't have a high rate of infections, right? People kept working. Florida, another state, people kept working. Nobody would stop. But in California, we had such a high rate of COVID, right? A lot of young people, which surprised me with COVID. And if, we lived it, my mother-in-law was passing away. We couldn't go see her in her last days because we weren't vaccinated.
Yeah.
That's insane, right? To me, I was like, and I argued with them, what can I give to her now? She's dying. She's not going to have any time left, right?
Yeah.
But the way that, you're right, they run things through here, and if it works here, then it spreads like a disease.
I think it's important that you mention that, because it brings me to the next thing I want to ask you about. Because you've actively seen how Democrats are essentially driving our state into the toilet. And you made the choice to run. How was that first campaign for you?
Well, the first campaign, I really didn't campaign. I was just a frustrated citizen who was fed up with Adam Schiff, and I wanted to get involved somehow. And nobody was running from the independent side, so I decided to run. I met a lot of good people. It was kind of a learning curve for me, trying to figure out what I was going to do if I decided to run again, which I did. I decided to run for state assembly. So I had better focus, more information on who to talk to. And I just started knocking on doors.
Yeah.
I mean, we ran a campaign with $11,000 for state assembly. My opponent had over $1 million.
Yeah. Some city council positions are over a couple million.
Yes.
For their campaign. So that's 11,000. That's really.
And I made it through the primary.
Yeah. That's crazy. Good. Congratulations.
And then when it came to the general, he got more votes than I did. But what I was impressed more about my campaign was the fact that all the new voters, I have more votes than him from new voters and more votes from non-party preference people. Right. So that's a positive sign. That means that other people are looking at it going, wait a minute, the state's not going in the right direction. We're not moving in the right direction. Yes, 60% Democrat district, the chances of winning that are slim, but there's hope. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, I think. And I think the light is people like you and me at our level, groundswell, let's go. Not people that are career politicians, people that just want to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And kind of like when I was on my campaign, I ended up every speech with, we just need to be kind to one another and just listen. We don't have to agree.
Yeah.
Right? I compare it to being married, right? You have to compromise. You're not going to stay married, period, right? At some point, right? You have to give in. She has to give in. It's just that you have to work together. You might not like it, but suck it up because what you're doing is in the best interest of the family, right? And I think politicians forget that we're their family and they don't make decisions in the best interest for all of us, specific groups, right?
Yeah.
My city council person, Monica Rodriguez, she does not like Sunland Tahunga, right? She calls us all racist, right?
Wow.
Because she doesn't agree with people having difference of opinions, right? Sunland Tahunga back in the day was, motorcycle, hippie kind of town, but it's not like that anymore. It's not. Predominantly Armenian community, but it's very friendly. I wouldn't be up there if it wasn't friendly.
Yeah.
Right? I live near the mountains. Can't beat that.
Yeah.
She never comes up. She doesn't allow the neighborhood councils to have their meetings in her little office in Sunland Tahunga. She doesn't come to our parade. She just keeps away from us, which is a shame, really, because she's supposed to be representing us.
Yeah.
Right? We're part of her CD7. So, some of these politicians take it personal when we disagree with them for whatever reason. So people like her need to go away. Right?
I agree. And
she's part of the Acevedo group who owns all the, I think, Vallarta markets, and they're big in construction. So all they want to do is build.
Yeah.
Right? And she's part of that group where she kind of condones that and wants them to build. Right? Is she getting any money out of it? I don't know. I don't really care. I think at some point she needs to worry about us, not Mr. Acevedo.
That's a great point that you're bringing up because I think that there's so many career politicians or people who are involved in politics because they want to serve either some kind of business interest or just purely ego, right? They want to be recognized, or as there's a common meme too in politics of like people who are failed actors and end up like, becoming, and it really is something that is, I think it can feel a little discouraging as somebody who's involved in civics, right? I'm just wondering, like, what do you think we can do to change that? How do we just vote them out? I mean, these are people with deep pockets, like you said, sometimes coming into these races with millions of dollars and, budgets that outpace their opponents by 100x, right? So how do we push back? How do you think we push back?
Well, I think, first of all, education, right? Sharing information with facts, right? Not rumors or did you hear or what did you see on Instagram or Facebook, with actual facts of what's really happening, right? Part of it is showing people some of these bills that are being passed, right? There's a Senator Wiener up in Northern California. He's a very powerful human being, right? All his bills have to do with pedophilia, allowing that kind of stuff.
Wow.
What's being taught in our schools. I don't care what your personal lifestyle is, but if you are a leader, You need to act like a leader. And taking pictures in leathers and showing your support for certain groups isn't appropriate, right? Me being in the Army, I would tell you that I never drank with my soldiers, never. I would have one drink during whatever we were doing, and I'd say, okay, guys, be safe. I got to go, right? Because there's certain things you just don't do as a leader, right?
Yeah.
You know, in order to be a good leader, you have to set the example. Right? And it might not be, you might like to drink, but you can't, you shouldn't.
Yeah.
And I always had a say. I would always tell my guys, look, not anybody can sit with me at the table. You can all stand around. And I would say jokingly, you can serve me, but you can't sit with me. Because as a leader, you can't allow that to happen. And that's what politicians have allowed. I believe a lot of them go in with good intentions, but they get caught up with the money situation. So think about how much is Pelosi worth right now?
Oh, isn't she over $100 million?
Exactly. Her salary is $189.
Yeah. The math doesn't add up. Even Jasmine Crockett, who's been in Congress for less than a couple of years, is already a multimillionaire. And you look. I mean, I don't think it's just backroom deal type of stuff. It's also they get access to information and do stock trades, which is what Paul Pelosi does mostly, which I think should be illegal. I mean, I know that what's his name from Texas, like he disagrees with this. He's also a veteran.
I know you're talking about
Dan Crenshaw. He disagrees with that, but I think that look, if you're in public service, you shouldn't be enriching yourself at the cost of the taxpayer, right? It's
public service.
Exactly. Even if you have access to information that can enrich you, I think it's still a conflict of interest. And, why would we have, standards for every profession? It's rules for thee, but not for me.
Right.
A lot of times.
But even in the Army, I was privy to information that I couldn't share with my troops, even though I knew, until it came time for a specific day to let them know when they're probably boarding a plane or getting in vehicles going somewhere.
Yeah.
They don't know, right? And it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be. Pelosi's husband is part of that bullet train nonsense in California.
Really? Makes sense.
Right?
Makes
How
a lot
did he
of
get
sense.
the contract?
Yeah.
Right? So we gotta start thinking who we're electing, and if they're not doing what they say they're gonna do, and you'll know right away. Trump's a great example of that. Everything he's promised,
he's doing it.
He's doing it, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know why people are mad. He didn't lie.
He said everything. You go back a year and a half, you'll find tapes of him saying exactly. The Elon Musk thing didn't come out of nowhere. Doge didn't come out of nowhere. He talked about having him in there. He talked about tariffs. He talked about abolishing the IRS. I'm still waiting for that to happen. I would love for that to happen.
He's still talking about that one.
He's still talking about that one, yeah. I saw a post today about how apparently the next thing, and this may be towards the end of the year, but he's either going to announce no tax on anybody who earns under $150,000. That would be terrific. I mean, I kind of have a libertarian stance when it comes to taxes. I'm like, tax me the minimum, because you're all going to waste it. You're all going to enrich yourselves. And then we get these kinds of situations like we have in California, the bullet train, or $25 billion in 5 years towards homelessness that nobody can account for. How is your priority not, providing some forensic accounting for where this money went, just instead of just saying, oh, we don't know, but let's give them another $2 billion.
Yep. And now she resigned.
Who?
The leader of the Los Angeles Housing Authority.
She did?
She resigned.
Interesting.
Because she's being investigated for some $2 million homes she owns.
Interesting.
Right? On a salary of $400,000 or whatever it is.
Yeah, same thing with Newsom. He bought a few months ago his third $9 million mansion. His salary, $200,000.
Yep.
It's crazy.
It's people need to wake up and realize what's going on. And I think part of it is the younger generation is not fully engaged, right, at this point. And that's just my opinion. And I think we need to get them engaged. And by getting them engaged, we need to bring them in, get them involved, and not involved in the sense, listen to what I say and sit there.
Yeah.
Get them involved.
Yeah.
Get down and dirty right away so you know what's truly happening so that you can make a difference. Kind of like when I left the Army. I wanted young people to take my place. I think that's a smart move, right?
Yeah.
And in life, we all want that, right? We want the new generation to come in, step in. We don't need to shackle you down with nonsense. I think we all have common interests, right? Of course, we're all going to have our separate little differences that we want, but for the most part, we all want to have public safety.
Yeah.
We all want to have food on our tables, and we all want to be able to afford to live here, right?
Yeah.
Right? Those are things that we can all agree on. We don't have to agree on everything. We don't. We need to agree on certain things, right?
Yeah.
We need to stop Los Angeles Department of Water and Power from running amok. We need to stop Edison from making the mistakes they made, right? These are companies that make a lot of money on the taxpayers in the city of LA and the county of LA, and yet we don't hold them accountable on anything. They can run amok, raise prices, do whatever they want, and there's always an excuse why they're going to do something. Right? Well, they need to live within their means, like you and I do.
Yeah.
Right? It's common sense.
Yeah.
If we can't go to Disney World this summer, we're not going.
Yeah.
Right?
Here's my question. You just mentioned, bringing in young people. There are a lot of Gen Z, especially young males, who voted for Trump and identify with Trump's message. There are a lot of different theories and conversations around as to why. I think it's just like, as men, we've been, culturally beat down and said that how awful we are for the last decade and a half. That, the younger ones are coming up. They're like, I don't mess with any of that. And I think it's a good turn. But at the same time, how do we keep the momentum going with bringing in more young people like that? Because I think that if you look at both sides objectively, right, you have the Republicans where we talk about, individual freedom. We talk about, earning your own business, being your own man in this sense, right? And then on the other hand, you have the Democrats who are offering basically everything that appeals to the lowest impulses, right? You have, you're a victim. We'll pay you, we'll give you money, or you can live on welfare, or you can, free health care for everybody. Oh, you don't have to pay for school anymore. As though, that's not, there isn't already an infrastructure where these banks already have all this money. And, to me, a lot of it is unrealistic, but because they appeal to these lower emotions, I think it's sometimes they can get the immediate emotional, attachment, and people feel like, oh, I need them so I can survive. Without them, I won't exist. When in reality, Republicans are offering something that you'll have freedom. You'll actually have freedom with us. With them, you'll be under the shackles of like government.
Right. But I think it's because the Republican mentality has always been us older people will run the show and we'll make your world better. And I think that's the mistake I think we've made, right? We look, I'm part of a group that I am the youngest member of that group, right? And I'm over 60. So when I'm the youngest member, that's a bad sign, right? I think, right? When I'm hearing about how they helped Walter Mondale's election or somebody before Walter Mondale, I can't remember, from the 60s, right? That didn't work then. It's not working now. Yeah. So we need a mindset, right? Gotcha. And kind of like when I left the Army, I was set in my ways, right? By then I was at the point where I don't care. I'm going to do it my way. We need young, fresh ideas, right? From every aspect of life, right? If you look around, most of the candidates that ran were women. Yeah.
I do see that a lot. A lot of the people involved. Yeah.
What happened to the men, right?
Yeah.
Are they discouraged? Are they afraid? I think it's a little bit of both. I think they're discouraged, but they're also afraid because when you get involved in politics, you're a target. Yeah. Right? I remember when I was collecting signatures, people were throwing water bottles at me. And I was just collecting signatures. But as soon as they heard I was a Republican.
This was you door knocking and somebody?
No, standing in front of Vaughn's in Sunland, Tahunga. Wow. Collecting signatures, right? And people got angry.
That's crazy.
And so I wouldn't let my wife come out at all. Any event I went, my son was always afraid, so he would go with me. My son's a big dude. I think you met him.
I think I did at the Glendale one. Yeah.
He's tall and big. And people get very angry, not knowing who I really am as a person, right? Just because I have DR. And I think, and some of the party people don't really agree with me, right? I said the other night at another CRA event that, and some of the people in the crowd didn't like what I had to say, but I was being honest, how I truly felt. And I said, my goal is to recruit young people and you older people that don't want to actually work, then you need to just stay home because this isn't social hour anymore. We're here to work, to support California and to do the right thing for California. It's not happy hour, right? And some got offended. And one of my friends just chuckled at me and goes, you shouldn't have said that. No, they need to know. We're not here to just joke and smoke and talk shop about the way it used to be.
Yeah.
We need to talk about what we're going to do. And if a 95-year-old person can't even pick up a phone and dial for candidates, we don't need them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's harsh, but that's reality.
But I see where you're coming from, because I do think that right now, especially in California, we're at a turning point, right? We've had a Democrat regime basically for what, the last 20 years, basically?
Probably longer than that.
Yeah. I don't count Schwarzenegger as a Republican.
He's a Democrat.
Yeah. And so they've had a majority in the state assembly. They've had, who knows how long they've had the LA mayorship, right? So I think that we're at a turning point. We're at a moment where if there isn't some kind of pushback, the state's just going to go down. We're already living in third world conditions, in my opinion. Especially, I never imagined, like, as somebody who grew up in Brazil, walking out on the street and not seeing like one tent here or there of homeless people, which is understandable. Any big city would have that. No, entire encampments. And I volunteer once a week at this at a soup kitchen downtown, and every week it's more and more and more people. And usually we serve maybe a couple hundred people, but it's like it's nonstop. They just keep coming, and I don't think our leaders really have any sort of interest in having a solution. And the only way to force for there to be a solution is if we push back, if we really organize and do something to not only hold them accountable, but to put people in leadership positions where they're going to make the decisions needed to turn this around. Because I do think, look, if Kamala Harris runs and she wins, God forbid, the state's over. It'll take a long time for us to recover.
Even if Xavier Becerra wins, he's running, it'll be over. Right?
Yeah.
And he's going to get the Latino vote because of his last name.
Yeah.
And he's not a very good human being. He's part of that people that grew up in the San Fernando Valley, Monica Rodriguez, him, Alex Padilla, all these people are all dirty.
Yeah.
And they don't really care about the people. Because if they did, they've been in positions already where they can help. And they haven't.
They've been for years, right? Becerra, wasn't he? Was he Attorney General? Or
he was Attorney General here.
Yeah.
He was also, I believe, a city councilman here. I think he was a senator also. And then he got promoted under Biden, and Biden took him up there.
What was he doing under Biden?
Secretary of something. I can't even remember.
Yeah. Probably did nothing. That's why
he
can't remember.
He didn't do anything. But I think, the key is, you're right, we got to get people so involved. And I think the men are the key, right? Because I think they've been chastised for so long, abused, mistreated, and they're afraid. Right?
Yeah.
They're just afraid. And it's a tough business. If you get in, you got to be ready to tolerate the nonsense, the craziness that goes with it, the people that attack you, the death threats you get on your life because you're not, what they want you to be, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to be a racist, homophobic, regardless, just because you have that letter R in front of your name.
Yeah.
Which is wrong. It's wrong. But that's what the Democrats have pandered to people, and they believe it. I don't believe it.
It's propaganda, and it's something that is really unfortunate because you look, especially the Republican Party in Los Angeles, you go to any of these meetings, you'll find people of all backgrounds. You'll find every ethnicity. There are a lot of old people too, but there's everybody there. I've met young people. I've met every background, and I mean, you also have people who are gay and are Republican. Right. You have one of the bigger Republican donors. It's huge, a tech giant. Yep. It's Peter Thiel, right? You have, what is it, the Log Cabin Republicans, a big lobby of gay Republicans. It's unfortunate that Democrats have been able to shape the narrative to basically make it seem like Republicans are just exclusionary, right? When in fact we have just as much diversity, if not more. And
you just don't brag about it.
Exactly. We don't make it a talking point. Yeah. And in fact, you look at our state assembly Republicans, people who are elected, they're mostly women, Latina women.
Yep.
right? They're all so. It's just interesting to me how that ends up panning out. And as far as the male issue goes, I do think that it's part of where the secret is. I think also something that reverts back to something that you're very passionate about too. It's parental rights that you kind of started talking about, and you're involved with the Armenian community. I know that's a big issue for them too. Right. I think that parents, especially over COVID, started realizing what their kids were being taught. Right. And that became a huge issue. And that caused a lot of people who may not have ever identified or vote Republican to start thinking, oh, maybe I have to vote for these guys now so I can make sure that my kids aren't being indoctrinated. You know, how do you think, because that's such a huge issue, and that was a huge issue in this last election, right? One of the most effective ads was about parental rights. And you have Newsom passing laws, approving laws that basically make it legal for the teacher to not communicate to the parent that their child is transitioning or has any thoughts like that. I mean, how do you see that fight happening in California, and how could we effectively galvanize an issue like that to bring people in?
Well, I think the most important thing we need to do with that particular issue is make sure parents are truly aware, right? Because, and I'll give you an example in Glendale what happened, right? The first event was June 2023, I think. I can't remember the year now, but it was a peaceful protest. Parents were going there to speak to the school board. Well, then Antifa came in, and it became, there was fights, right? So when they put it on the news, it was all about the fights. Right? How parents are crazy, but nobody pointed the finger at Antifa. Antifa was there, right? And so it's just the messaging again, right? Showing people books of what's really happening in schools. I had a guest, her name was Aneta. She was running for Glendale School Board on a podcast I did a year ago, and I had her bring in books. I said, don't come talk to me in the audience about, I want books so we can show the audience the books that are being taught in school.
And what's in those books? I know, but for the audience,
sexual orientation. A lot of it is LGBTQT, boy sex,
and they're graphic.
They're very graphic, right? And they're made for 8-year-old kids, right? I don't know about you, but when I was 8, the last thing I'm thinking about is anything like that.
Yeah,
right?
you're like reading little like stories like what's it?
Even if I'm reading it, I usually was playing when I was a kid.
Yeah,
I was never into any of that. I didn't even become interested in women until I was in high school because I was too busy with sports and school. So it didn't faze me. And then back in those days, you had to get parental consent, right? So you take a form from the school to your house. They're going to teach sex ed this semester, and your parents have to sign.
Yeah.
There's no such thing anymore. They don't have to sign.
It's crazy.
Even the medical part, when they hit 12 years old, right? And my son got a letter from his insurance company. Your daughter just turned 12. She needs to sign this form if she wants to give you the right to know what's going on with her medically. Now, how is that normal? How is that right?
How can it? Yeah, that's ultimately reversing the roles. Because even if you're going to shoot something with a child, right, the parent has to sign off. I remember being a kid, I had a field trip. My parents had to sign off. If they didn't sign off, I didn't get to go.
Right.
It's a little bit of putting the responsibility on a person who would not, because of their life experience, have a full understanding of what they're signing. It's almost like they're doing that on purpose because they're hoping that they're just going to sign and then the parent is shut out.
Well, think about this. And my 12-year-old granddaughter has Down syndrome. So mentally, she's not even 12.
Yeah.
Right. So the state of California is giving her the right to say, I don't want to tell my dad and my mom anything.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
And then the fact that the schools give a young person the ability to fill out a form and say, I don't want my parents to know this. I don't want my parents to know that. It's ridiculous. So we're taking the power away from the parents because we want to, again, we're placating to certain groups that we want them to have more rights than a parent. And I'm not against kids having rights, but we don't allow them to drink until they're 21, right?
Yep.
They can't join the army until they're 18, right?
Can't get a tattoo.
No, but yet if they want to have a sex change, they can ask for it. Nothing you can do about it, right?
Yeah. I see it as a power grab because they're using the LGBT thing as a vehicle to do that, to essentially shut the parents out, and these children will essentially be products of the state.
Well, conquer and divide, right?
Yeah.
COVID, same thing.
Yeah.
I have family that I couldn't visit. They wouldn't visit, right? I had family in Florida who, if you went to the house, she had sprays outside her door. You had to spray yourself down before you walked into their home, right?
Yeah.
Right. Family now. This is actual blood family. Politics, right? My parents became Republicans, but everybody else is, far left wing nut, and they believe in all that nonsense. And if you don't follow this, you're racist. If you don't become a Democrat, you're just a crazy person if you're not a Democrat.
Yeah.
And it's torn the family apart. And what better way, kind of like a combat operations, right? What better way to take over a city or a village? When you go in,
divide and conquer.
You divide the people, right?
Yeah.
Right? You divide, they're the enemy. They're the enemy. It happens every war, right? That's how you win wars. You don't win wars, well, you might win wars with nuke weapons now, but back then, it was all an operation. You go into a specific city, hey, you figure out who's on your side and who's not on your side, move them out, right?
It's an intelligence operation, basically.
And they've done a great job. I was interviewed by a Democrat precinct captain, and I asked him, what do you guys do to attract people? And his answer was so simple. I don't know why I didn't think of that. Right? His answer was simple. Tony, we go to bars and restaurants. We look for young people, waiters and waitresses, bartenders, and we talk to them.
And they develop a connection on that human level.
He says, I don't tell them to join a party right away. We just talk to them. That's how we recruit. He says, how do you think we had 9 candidates run against you?
Yeah.
9 Democratic candidates ran against me.
That's crazy.
Right?
Yeah.
And he supported every one of them. Even though they knew who was going to win, at least he supported them all. So now he has their loyalty because he helped them. And now he's going to move them around to other positions to run.
That's crazy. It truly, they've developed a machine that I think even outside of politics, taking it back to schools, right? It starts with indoctrinating people in school to think that basically if you're a Democrat, you will have your, that whole thing about identities and all this stuff. You'll have your identity protected, or you'll have access to these social services and all this other stuff, and then that's reinforced by popular culture, right? Because you think of pop culture, you don't think of any Republican, you think of the primarily extreme leftists, right? And then you have movies reinforcing that. You have Disney. They've truly crafted a machine. I don't see any other way you can be a Republican without having some sort of interest in independent thinking and some semblance of rebellion in your spirit. Not necessarily rebellion in the sense of like rebellion against God or anything. Right. If anything, it's become rebellious to be a person of faith and to be a Republican, because the state, the regime itself is Democrat. Right. That's it. It's blue, it's left, and now the founding principles and the things that made this country great, if you abide by any of that, you're rebellious all of a sudden.
And faith has become, you're a criminal.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the way they talk about people with faith is you're a criminal.
They've arrested those women outside of an abortion clinic for praying. Yeah. It's crazy.
But people are not, and I think what I did find out during my campaign, people were just not very aware of certain things. So when I always spoke about specific bills, so that no one can argue that, right? If there's a Senate bill that got approved or Assembly bill, we can see who signed it and who didn't sign it, right? Kind of like this San Fernando City Council had a meeting. They had a meeting, I think it was like 4 hours long, about making it a sanctuary city, right? Now, I'm not in the sanctuary city. I don't agree with that nonsense, but there's already a state law, State Assembly Bill 54.
That makes the whole state a sanctuary state.
So we're wasting time and money and effort on something that's already a law just so that the local community can feel good about it, get a warm and fuzzy.
It's virtue signaling. Same thing with Cory Booker when he did that 25-hour. Everybody was like praising him. And I thought, do you not understand that the whole building had to be open so he could do a 25-hour speech and appear all virtuous, anti-Trump or whatever it is?
Yeah.
You have to pay all the security that was there running the building outside of the lights. You know, it's millions of dollars so this guy can appear good. And it's interesting how so much of our politics devolves into the theater rather than the practical aspect of what are you doing to actually improve people's lives, right?
Well, think about, let's just talk about LA, right? When the fires happened, right? The mayor and city council got all defensive. They knew that they cut the budget.
Yeah.
They didn't tell anybody else. They cut the budget. They told the fire department, but not anybody else. So when it happened, you know, we have manpower issues, right? And then they get defensive, and then finger pointing begins, right?
Yeah.
And I always say this. I said, again, I'm not a big fan of the mayor because I think
she's awful.
She's horrible.
Yeah.
But any decision she makes, it has to run through the city council. So let's hold all of them accountable, and let's find out who voted to cut the budget for the fire department, right? And then put them all on blast.
Yeah.
Why? Instead of you got them now, all of them pointing the finger at the mayor. Yeah, we don't want her, right? And for example, my city council, I know she wants to run for mayor. So that's probably going to be her ammunition if she runs for mayor against Karen Bass. So people need to be aware that certain things and who, at what level it happens. Because if they're not aware, then you're going to blame just one person. In San Fernando Valley's meeting, city council meeting, they pointed at Burbank, that Burbank approved a sanctuary. It was approved by the city council that they're a sanctuary
So they
city.
used that to try to get it for themselves.
But it was a lie. Burbank didn't approve
Never approved it. Huh.
Right.
The thing is that our political system is so gargantuan, so huge. There's so many different, like, I went to a board of supervisor meeting for the first time a few weeks ago. I think it was like 3 weeks ago. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, what do these people do? It's the first thing I had in my head. What do they do? Because we already have a city council. We have the neighborhood councils. We have the mayor. We have like every sort of, governing body that you can imagine. Like, what does this council do? And I sit there for an hour and a half and I'm watching them just give out their scrolls, right? Or whatever they call it, for an hour and a half. And I'm like, this is what they're doing. And I had to leave at some point because I had to work. I can't sit there. So I was hoping to see them debate any sort of measure. Didn't. They ended up, I saw it later on their live stream, approving $700 million to homelessness. And, you see, when I first got there, because of the ceremony, the whole place was packed. And then you watch it later, there's 5 people there who were going to do public comment, right? So I think that they benefit a lot from creating such a confusing bureaucracy where they can, kind of help each other out to stay in power, to enrich themselves, to enrich their friends. I think that if we were to Doge California, there is so much graft, corruption. I mean, just on the homeless side, you just look on that, and I saw something that it truly blew me away. So there's this building that was, I think there's 60 units in it, but it cost just about $600 million for them to build downtown for homeless people. And it's essentially, it breaks down to being a luxury condo for homeless people. There's a gym, there's everything. And the math just doesn't make sense why they built it like that. Because usually units for homeless people, they cost between $40,000 and $60,000. It doesn't make sense why they're each coming close to $1 million for each unit, right? And you go look at, first off, the developer got the contract subsidized, highly subsidized by the city. And the contract only requires that the developer have homeless people in the building for 5 years. What's happening in 5 years? We're going to have the Olympics and the World Cup. Afterwards, they're going to clean up the streets, and afterwards, they're going to put everybody back, and they're going to be able to sell those units at market or value or higher. So they built that investment on our dime so they can profit off of it.
Mm-hmm. So I'm in construction. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you a great example of how that really works.
Yeah.
So every contract in the city is not given to a private contractor, right?
Interesting.
Right. It goes to whoever they deem blessed to get it. And then there's project labor agreements, okay? So when you have a project labor agreement in California, it means that you pay higher wages, which is great, right? So I'm going to use electricians as an example. On a project labor agreement, an electrician makes between $90 and $100 an hour, right? A private electrician makes between $50 and $60 an hour, okay? So now, if we're doing all these project labor agreements with all these skill sets, it's going to cost a lot more, right? Because we're going to pay more, right? Instead of hiring one, we can hire two if we do a private company, and we're supporting a private company, right? That'll do as good a job as a union company. Not that I'm against unions, but I'm looking at it from a financial standpoint.
Yeah.
I can put more people to work, right?
It'll get done faster.
Without all this markup, because the contractor is going to mark it up, right? So now instead of costing, let's just say $300,000 for a homeless apartment, it's going to cost me $800,000 and above in LA, city of LA. And that's the problem, right? Because we have all these people making more money. Not that they don't deserve it, the worker, but they're going to get paid, right? I can hire two electricians for the same price of one if you go to a non-union shop, right? But it's union, so, and I know unions hate me, but I don't care. We got to stop. We got to start thinking what's financially responsible for the taxpayer.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of us financially responsible for the politician or the companies. Let's worry about the taxpayers. Those project labor agreements are a killer.
Yeah.
Burbank Airport project, it's a $3 billion project. It's a small airport, right?
Yeah.
And they're just upgrading it. They're not even building a new runway. It's just upgrade to the front of the airport.
Well, I think you mentioned something interesting with the whole union thing. I think, and it made me think for a second, because you have all these different parties coming in to negotiate these contracts, and you have nobody on the side of the taxpayer.
Nope.
The mayor or the city officials who are supposed to be on the side of the taxpayer, they have their own re-election interests. They have their own, I'm going to help my buddy because of this and that. And nobody is standing up for the taxpayer. And that's why we're seeing all this go unaccounted for, because you get somebody coming in and saying, I'm going to charge you this much. And they know it's the city. The city is just going to be like, okay. Wow. They have no interest. They're like, okay, well, you help me with my re-election? Okay, well, let's do it.
Burbank's a great example. The Cusamanos, they're big corporation. They build a lot of housing, commercial properties in Burbank. They were the biggest donors to my opponent.
Huh. Interesting.
Right. So it's this is why I think that we have to reform government, that part of the system. We have to make it an equal playing field for everybody. And my solution is, hey, let's put in the Constitution. If you're running for governor, you're only going to get this amount of money from the taxpayer. If you're running for state assembly, you're only getting this. If you're running for local office, you're getting $10,000 for your campaign. All the candidates get the same, right? So that levels the playing field, and it keeps the big business and the unions away from the politicians. And then you'll see a decrease in people running for office because there's no longer money involved for them.
Yeah, there isn't the financial incentive.
There's no incentive for them except they want to do the right thing for the people.
Yeah. I think we need to go back to that.
That's the way it should be. I think that's really the problem because, you got to think of it with common sense. If somebody donates a lot of money to you, you're going to feel like you owe them.
Yeah.
Even if you're a good person, you're going to say, I got to help them out.
Yeah.
Right? I'll give them this little contract here, this one over here. And then the small mom and pops who everyone says is the backbone of our economy, they're the ones that get neglected.
Yeah. They can't afford to compete when essentially buying up influence. So
it's super important that the people wake up to that. And I'd rather have it taxpayer money paying for the campaign than outside interests, right? Because then it's managed and it's controlled.
So, Tony, I think we both have a similar goal. We both want to see California turn red. What pathway do you see for us to get there?
Well, I think the pathway is the one we're on. It has to be dual, though. It can't just be the same people running for office, right? Because I truly believe we need fresh blood to do that. We need to make sure that we educate the youth, and we need to start at a young age, right? I say high school. Start going to high schools and doing presentations or inviting them to some of the functions. Hey, bring your mom and dad, come in, let's talk. And just enlighten them on what's truly important, what we're trying to do. Because I think they don't know what we're trying to do, right? They listen to the social media.
They hear all the messaging.
And it's confusing. I mean, sometimes I'm frustrated when I get home because you hear so much nonsense, it's not true. So I think the path is get younger people to get involved, canvas with the candidates, learn the process because it's a process, right? And then once they learn it, step in those shoes, right? I truly don't think that somebody should be in office for more than 4 years.
Term limits.
Yeah. And we're not going to change term limits because that's a constitutional thing, but that's the way it should be, right? It should be you do 4 years and you're out.
Yeah.
Right? Kind of like the Army, an enlisted person can only do 30 years and you have to get out, right? Mandatory retirement. There's nothing wrong with the older generation being mentors, right? Help us understand. I didn't know anything. I just jumped in.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't have a clue. I did a lot of volunteer work, but I never realized that political office was dirty. I mean, I knew it was dirty, but not evil dirty where people, throw crap at you or insult you or attack your family or attack you. They call you things they don't even know you, and they're calling you names that
they're trying to smear you so they can try to reduce your effectiveness, basically.
And it's sad that we've allowed the politicians to do that to us, and that's the key, right? There's nothing. I go back to when I was a kid growing up. If you did something wrong and your neighbors told your parents would believe your neighbors and you'd be in trouble, right? Nowadays, if you complain about a child to a neighbor, the neighbor will probably shoot you, right? Or attack you or not talk to you ever again because, no, my child will never do anything like that.
Or try to smear you online, like film a video, try to make you look bad.
Well, Tahunga, they're famous for videotaping your car. If you cut somebody off, they're posting your license plate on Instagram and Facebook.
Really?
So, it's really crazy how we got in there. And I think the key is we can't quit.
Yeah.
It's easy to quit, right? It's easy. When I lost my campaign, I didn't care. I cared, but I didn't. I called him, congratulated him. And I told him, I said, but I'm not going away. So just know that I'm going to be blowing up your phone if I don't think you're doing your job. And it's funny because I don't know if you heard what's happening in Glendale and Tahunga, Sun Valley. A lot of the toxic dirt is being dropped off in those areas.
From the fires.
Right.
Interesting.
And, we have a little movement in my city that we started. So I called him. I called Nick Schultz, and he actually called me back. And I said, look, if you don't want me to run again, I need your help. You need to, you might not be able to fix this for us, but you need to stand with us because this is a horrible thing that's happened.
Yeah.
Right? And he did, actually. He did.
That's good.
So I was super impressed that he did that. So there's hope. There's hope.
Yeah.
We just have to keep plugging away and not worry about making those giant steps. Let's just take the baby steps and let's start taking over the neighborhood councils and the city council. Right? That's where we need to start. Those are the offices we need to go after because we need to. That's local government. That's what we control.
Yeah.
Right at this point.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Tony, thank you so much for coming over.
Thank you for having me.
You want to tell the good people who are watching where they can find you, your social media or your website? You
can find me at Tony. My website is, well, I don't have a website anymore, but you find me on Facebook and Instagram, Tony for California Assembly. Tony Rodriguez for California Assembly. Easy to reach, easy to find. I'm open to speak to anybody. And I'm hoping that you young people out there take my challenge and come on and join us and teach us a few things about what we want the country to look like a few years down the road. And his events are great. The first one that I went to, they had some great speakers. You had somebody who, he spoke about how the country of Mexico is suing our arms manufacturers to try to blame our Smith & Wesson and our American companies for their crime for their cartel down there. And that, to me, they're just trying to infringe on our Second Amendment. That's ultimately what it is. So it was very informative. There was pizza. There's a lot of great people that I met. So you can find out about his events on his social media. I'll put the links down below in the description.
And thank you so much for coming by, Tony.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.